What is up, guys? Welcome to another installment of Project RX-8. Tonight we're going to be installing an exotic speed exhaust manifold on the car, getting rid of the big clunky cast iron unit that comes stock. In the process, we're going to be deleting the air pump assembly as well because, let's face it, rotary engines and catalytic converters just don't really play well together. So let's get started, shall we? So let's take a quick moment and we'll kind of overview what we're working with here. So here's the header. Like I said, it's made by Exotic Speed. They're not sponsoring this build in any way. I found them on eBay, was the only place I was able to buy this at a reasonable price. Or you can order directly from their website at a significant markup. The reasons why I went for this header are as follows. Originally I was considering a racing beat unit, and then after finding this one as one of the options, a couple things stood out to me. One, the price point. For 460 bucks, I want to say it was. These welds are pretty good quality. The stainless used seems of high quality. But the biggest important thing to me is the merge collector. And that's kind of what caught my attention the most. So being kind of an exhaust manifold whore that I am, and going with some high dollar headers on some of my other all motor builds, this collector caught my attention the most. I think for the money, this is the best collector you can get in the market. Now, I don't think you can really see, let's see if I can focus in there. You can't really see the merge that well with the camera lighting, but this is where the cheap eBay headers and the $100 headers like go wrong. And when you spend that little money on a header, usually you're getting a real piece of shit right here. And this is probably one of the most important parts of the header, aside from the tubing diameters and everything else. The other selling point for me was that the outlet here after the final merge is 70 millimeter, and I think that's appropriate diameter for naturally aspirated rotary making over 200 horsepower. So there was a few selling points that got me to go with this option, and that's what they were. So with the header, they give you new exhaust bolts, where this is going to meet your mid-pipe section, or would be your stock catalytic converter if you're retaining that. Now, my OEM cat is gone. As you guys know, when I was installing my ignition coils, I was installing them because I thought they were failing, causing the catalytic converter to clog. And even with the new coils installed, my cat was glowing, and that was only 34,000 miles on the clock. So the factory unit is dead. I'm not going to shell out the money for another one. Like I said, I just don't think that rotaries and catalytic converters play nice together, especially when you are pre-mixing oil into the combustion. It just clogs them up. So it's gone. It's been a straight pipe in there ever since. They give you a new exhaust gasket ring to mount as so. And that's going to kind of get crushed in there. You get a stainless steel bracket, which will adapt to the back here and be a support. I think it uses one of the factory support locations. Now, like I said, I'm getting rid of air injection. What air injection does is it injects cold air from your air pump when the engine is cold, which is also going to be much more lean. But it prevents it kind of helps prevent following your cat and clogging it up, because the engine has to run rich when it's cool. So it injects air in there to kind of help warm the cat up quicker and prevent it from getting clogged. Obviously, it doesn't really work too well, so I did buy a block-off plate. You can easily make one of these, but I'm just being lazy and I didn't feel like making one. It's about 20 bucks from Racing Beat, or maybe not even $12 from Racing Beat. I also bought a new gasket for it, just because it was like 5 bucks or something, so make that a little bit easier. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the air pump assembly is up here. It's all this guy right here. So this is going to come out. I've read that you may or may not throw a check engine light for removing this. Some people say you don't, some people say that you do. I don't really care though, because after I'm done with the header installation, the next mod is going to be Mazda Edit with a Tatrix tuner. So I can enable or disable whichever cell codes that I want. So that's what we're dealing with for hardware. Let's start diving into the install. So for the first steps of the install here, I didn't want to waste any time with B-roll footage for you guys, so jack the car up on all four corners, remove the passenger side wheel. Inside the passenger side wheel well, there's a little tiny cover that's right there. I've already gone ahead and removed that like so. We're gonna be getting at the 6 bolts that actually bolt the exhaust manifold to the car through this hole and from underneath the motor. So now that we are up in the air, the first step is gonna be, and this is gonna be a little bit difficult for me to film, but we're gonna remove the cross brace underneath, and then once that's down, we can start pulling the exhaust manifold bolts off. Oh, I'm sorry. We have to disconnect the passenger side motor mount, so we are gonna put a jack underneath it with a piece of wood to support the engine, as we're gonna have to raise the engine up a little bit. And then we can get at all the exhaust manifold bolts and drop the unit. So let's start diving into this. All right, so coming through our passenger side wheel well here, we got the oil pan supported with a jack and a piece of wood. There's a nut at the top of the motor, or the top of the motor mount here, holding it to the engine. Here's our vibration damper. I believe we're gonna have to take out this bolt that holds the vibration damper in place and move this free. And then, trying to get it on the camera here, there are 2 bolts down in the bottom here. Can't really get it at this angle. Let's see. Here we go. So these 2 bolts holding the bracket into the engine, those got to come out as well, and we're just going to let the bracket move free. And again, we're supporting the pan with a piece of wood and our jack. So quick note, when taking out the engine mount bolts, Racing Beats instructions has you take the upper nut off first and then followed by the lower 2 bolts. I wouldn't do this. I ended up putting the upper nut back on because when you're trying to take out this dampener bolt, there's a lot of squish and play in the dampener, and you want it kind of stabilized so you can get more mileage per crank with your wrench. I was using a micro click ratchet wrench, which kind of helped, but as you can see, as it was coming out, some of my threads got stripped, so I'm probably going to replace this bolt or just see if I can clean them up. What a turd, but just keep that in mind. So now that our motor mount is loose and the vibration dampener is out of the way, we're gonna go and disconnect the air pump tube at the exhaust manifold. There's 2 10mm nuts holding it in. All right, next step for me, at least, is I'm gonna continue to remove the complete air injection assembly. Again, this is only if you do not plan on utilizing air injection any longer. So now we could start loosening up the header itself. I'm gonna start from the back where it meets the mid pipe. There's an O2 sensor on top of it here, followed by this bracket, and then the 6 bolts, or 6 nuts, I should say, that hold it to the engine block itself. Alright guys, so now we're ready to put the header on. I'm going to reuse the stock exhaust manifold gasket. I just took Scotch-Brite to it and cleaned up where the cast iron kind of left some imperfections on it, so it's nice and smooth. As you saw, I wiped down the header with isopropyl alcohol. If you want to keep the nice finish on your header for as long as you can, keeping the oils from your fingers off of the steel is ideal. That's why I always wear latex gloves when I'm handling the header. Anytime you get the oils from your fingers on there and then you start the engine up, it cooks into there, and that's when you get those dark spots much quicker. Now, the color of it is going to degrade a little bit over time, and you will still maybe get some brown spots, but wiping it down with isopropyl alcohol, or a lot of people use vodka, either one will help it just kind of gold and change to a nice hue and keep some of the brilliance in it without the contaminants. So I'm going to just pretty much reverse what you just saw. I'm going to throw the gasket on, put the manifold on first. Actually, before I put the manifold up there, I'm going to put the intake or the O2 sensor in first. When I was taking the stock header off, if you saw, I could not get a wrench at this because of how tight it was. I actually had to undo the studs and then lower the manifold a little bit before I was able to take this off fully. So I'm gonna put the O2 sensor in first so I have plenty of room, bolt the manifold up, and then make the connection to the mid pipe. So let's get started. All right, guys, that is the completed header installation. So let's just recap a couple things here. Starting with the top here, because I removed the factory air pump assembly. As you saw, I cut down that big bracket that had all the wire looms and everything on top of it, and I just made it into a smaller bracket to support this. I think this is a igniter for ignition coils, but I could be wrong. This is either that or a relay. But this way it's minimalized. There's no less clutter, less weight. These wires, I taped the plugs off to prevent any water and moisture getting into them, and I just kind of tuck them away over here. That cleans up the engine bay quite a bit. Actually, I'm happy with that spot over there. Also with the factory airbags gone. So little by little, chipping away and making more room. So one thing that I thought that I had made a mistake when I was wrapping this header installation up is the Racing Beat directions say to leave the aluminum engine bracket in place. I took it out because I just didn't want to work around it, and I almost wasn't able to get it back in there. So depending on which header you have, you might want to be cognizant of that. Have that back in place, at least in the vicinity after you're installing the new header, so you have room to just kind of slip it back into place, just in case you may not be as lucky as I was to get it back in there after the header was installed. After it was installed, I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to take this header off again, but luckily I wasn't, so that worked out. Quite a bit more clutter removed. I thought the factory manifold was cast iron because I would see the flange and stuff at the top, and it gives off the appearance that it is, but looking underneath it, there is some stainless steel to it. It is heavy though. There's definitely weight savings with this new exhaust manifold. Here's the factory air pump. Here's what's left of that bracket. If I ever needed to revert back to stock, which I don't foresee me doing so because I don't really sell cars too often, I could just pick up another bracket and recreate this. Here's the solenoid for the air pump. So quite a bit of material removed, so the car keeps getting lighter and lighter. And I'll leave this off and I'll give you guys a sound sample of what this sounds like. So a couple things I should add. I did buy, over here in this corner, I did buy a Racing Beat dual resonated test pipe for the car, but I didn't run it. One, because I want to see if the cell spacer that was built into that test pipe that's on there, which is just some generic test pipe that came with the silver RX-8, I want to see if it would throw a check engine light or not. Like I said, it did, but then it went away and it hasn't come back. The reason why I'm not running this is for two reasons. Actually, there's a couple. The weight of this is heavier. Racing Beat makes this the same size as the stock exhaust diameter, and then it flares just past the flange here. It actually gets bigger, and I think that's really janky. Kind of disappointing actually to see that. The other reason is that I'm still running the factory catback. Because this is my daily and because rotaries do produce noise, I understand like switching to the side ports with the Renesas engine, exhaust noise is reduced a little bit. But the test pipe that's in here, just slapping that in and running this on the stock catback, it's actually not bad at all. There's like no drone. It's still like the OEM like crisp noise, but just like turned up a couple notches, like say like two ticks over what stock is, which is really not much, and it's very pleasant for a daily driver. So I'm suspecting that the exhaust noise is going to get a little bit louder with the header, but to be honest with you, I don't think I'm leaving much power on the table with the axle back or with the catback. I would say maybe like 2 to 3 horsepower, maybe 5 at most. But for a daily, I'm willing to kind of sacrifice that a little bit just to kind of keep the car quiet and streetable. So I think I'm going to end up leaving this setup. We'll see how loud it is at wide open throttle with the non-resonated test pipe in there and the new header. But that is just about it for this one. I will say this is probably one of the more difficult exhaust manifold installations just because of the amount of work that's required, having to undo the engine mount. The packaging is very tight on this motor, kind of More the reason why I don't like modern cars is because they just kind of cram stuff in there and making it more difficult to do. It took me probably about 4 hours, 5 hours start to finish. And that's just me taking my time and like kind of talking on the phone and stuff in between. But still, it's definitely a little bit more challenging. So if you're not up to the task, you know, just kind of think about that before you dive into it. But you don't need anything special to get this done. Just having the right tools and the assortment of wrenches and sockets and extensions, and you should be able to get at everything that you need to get at. Take your time and you'll probably be okay. So that's it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of Project RX-8, Project Great Daily. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below and I'll do whatever I can to help you guys out. But that's it for this one, guys. Till next time, done.